The station had no proper name, only a serial designation that no one bothered to remember, and it floated at the edge of a system most maps politely blurred. Its corridors smelled of antiseptic, overheated circuitry, and the faint metallic tang of recycled air that had been breathed too many times by people who were trying very hard not to think about where they were. Medic Jonas liked it that way. Forgettable places were safer, forgettable people even more so. He stood over an examination table, sleeves rolled up, forearms exposed, while a wounded infantryman complained loudly about the quality of the station's medgel. Jonas listened with professional patience, nodding at all the right moments while applying a synth skin patch that sealed torn muscle with a faint hiss. The gel shimmered, then hardened, forming a temporary lattice that would dissolve in a few days. "If it helps," Jonas said dryly, "this model was rated adequate by 3 out of 5 surgeons and 1 optimistic engineer." The soldier snorted despite himself, then winced. Humor worked better than pain suppressants half the time. Jonas had learned that early, back when laughter had been rarer and screams more common. He finished the patch, tapped a command into the wrist console, and sent the man limping toward recovery. Another body saved, another small delay against entropy. It was honest work, even if no one would ever call it heroic. The outpost's main medical bay buzzed with activity as the latest convoy docked. Red lights pulsed along the ceiling, signaling an influx of casualties, and Jonas felt the familiar tightening in his chest that came with controlled chaos. Stretchers slid in on grav lifts, bearing human and Sethari soldiers alike. The treaty said they were allies now. Reality said they bled differently, but screamed the same. "Try not to die in my hallway," Jonas called to a Sethari trooper whose long ears twitched irritably as he was wheeled past. "It's bad for morale and worse for the floors." The trooper managed a weak laugh before losing consciousness. Jonas smiled thinly and turned to the next patient. She was quieter than the rest. At first glance, she looked human enough. Same general proportions, same fragile sturdiness that defined most bipedal species in this quadrant. Then he noticed the ears, long and tapered, curving gently back along her skull. Sethari. She lay on the table with her hands folded over her abdomen, eyes alert despite the scorched armor plates and the darkened burns along her side. Her breathing was controlled, measured, as if pain were an inconvenience rather than a crisis. Jonas activated the scanner, a hovering ring of light that swept over her body, projecting translucent readouts into the air. "You're going to feel a slight warmth," he said, and by slight I mean unpleasantly noticeable. "I've survived worse introductions," she replied, her voice steady, accented but fluent. "Your machine hums like it's nervous." "It probably is," Jonas said. "It knows it's being judged." A faint smile touched her lips. The scanner chimed, highlighting internal injuries in amber and red. Jonas frowned, focusing. "You should be unconscious," he muttered, or at least complaining more convincingly. "I was taught endurance from an early age," she said. "Also sarcasm. It's cultural." "Ah," Jonas said. "That explains everything." He reached for a portable stabilizer, and as he adjusted its settings, she shifted slightly. Her hand lifted, fingers brushing his wrist. The contact was light, almost accidental, but it stopped him cold. Her touch lingered, tracing upward, following the pale, irregular patterns on his forearm. Old burns, healed badly, twisting like frozen lightning beneath the skin. Jonas stiffened. "Careful," he said, forcing a casual tone. "That feature costs extra." Her fingers paused. Her eyes narrowed, not in pain, but in focus. She traced the scars again, slower this time, as if reading something written only for her. The hum of the scanner faded into the background. For a moment, the station seemed very far away. "I know these marks," she said quietly. Jonas laughed, a short, brittle sound. "Unlikely. I don't usually offer guided tours." "They appear in our archives," she said, "in recordings from before the ceasefire." His smile didn't quite hold. "Your archives must be very creative." "Very precise," she corrected. Her gaze met his, sharp and searching. "Left by a cleansing plasma variant used once, then buried along with the incident." Jonas gently but firmly moved his arm away. "You're concussed," he said. "Hallucinations are common." "Then you should sedate me," she replied. Unless you're afraid I'll say something inconvenient? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The scanner beeped insistently, reminding them both that this was still a medical bay, and she was still bleeding internally. Jonas exhaled slowly. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, just long enough for him to notice. "Alira," she said. "Just Alira." "Of course it is," Jonas murmured. He adjusted the stabilizer and applied it to her side. The device flared to life, knitting tissue with threads of blue light. "Well, Elira, just Elira, you're going to be fine if you stop alarming my equipment and keep your hands to yourself." Her lips curved again, but her eyes never left his arms. "You should consider long sleeves," she said softly. "Some stories don't like being forgotten." Jonas met her gaze, the humor draining from his face for just a heartbeat before he masked it again. "Around here," he said, "forgetting is a survival skill." Outside the bay, the station shuddered as another ship docked. More wounded, more noise, more reasons to stay busy and not think. Jonas turned back to his work, but he could feel her watching him, as if she had already seen something he had spent 15 years trying to erase, and for the first time in a long while, the scars on his arms began to itch. Jonas discovered two things within the hour after treating Elira. First, she healed faster than any sci-fi patient he had ever seen. Second, she was absolutely not going to let the scars go. He noticed the healing when the stabilizer chimed early, projecting a mildly offended error message that suggested the tissue had already finished knitting itself and no longer required assistance. Jonas stared at the display, then at Alira, then back at the display. "Either you're regenerating at an illegal rate," he said, "or my equipment has finally decided to retire without telling me." Elira shifted on the table, sitting up a little, despite protocol and common sense. "Perhaps it simply respects me," she said. "Machines can sense authority." "This one barely respects gravity," Jonas replied, tapping the stabilizer until it powered down. "You're not cleared to sit up yet." "And yet," she said, sitting up anyway, "here I am." Jonas sighed, rubbing his eyes. "I'm adding uncooperative royalty to my list of unofficial diagnoses." Her head tilted. "Royalty?" He froze for exactly half a second. "Figure of speech," he said quickly. "You have regal posture, very intimidating. Terrifies the med drones." One of the hovering drones drifted past them, bumped lightly into the wall, and corrected its course with a sulky beep. Elira smiled. "See? Even your machines agree." Jonas turned away, pretending to review her chart, while his pulse recalibrated itself. The medical bay had thinned out, the initial flood of casualties redistributed to recovery wards or body storage, depending on how generous the universe had been feeling. The lights dimmed slightly, shifting to night cycle hues that were meant to encourage rest. Jonas had never understood how changing the color of the light was supposed to convince anyone that sleep was a good idea. He glanced back at Elira. She was watching him again, eyes alert, far too sharp for someone who should have been drifting into medicated oblivion. Her long ears twitched subtly as if responding to sounds he couldn't hear. Sithari's sensory range was irritatingly impressive. "You're supposed to be resting," he said. "I am," she replied. "I rest best when I'm learning." "That's unfortunate for both of us." She swung her legs off the table before he could stop her. Jonas opened his mouth to protest, then paused. Her balance was perfect. No dizziness, no tremor. Annoyingly impressive again. "I don't remember authorizing a discharge," he said. "I don't remember requesting permission," she countered. "But if it helps, I promise not to collapse dramatically." "That would be embarrassing." He gestured to a nearby chair. "Sit. If you faint, I'd rather it be from a seated position." She complied, folding herself into the chair with infuriating grace. For a moment they simply looked at each other, the quiet stretching. Jonas broke it by clearing his throat. "You said my scars are in your archives," he said lightly, as if discussing weather patterns. "Your people document a lot of forearms?" "They document events," she said. "The forearms are incidental." "Lucky me." She leaned forward slightly. "The records describe a human medic stationed near the Karen Rift, a temporary field hospital. A cleansing sweep was ordered while civilians were still inside." Jonas busied himself sanitizing instruments that were already clean. "Sounds like poor planning." "Sounds like a massacre," she corrected gently. He didn't answer. They also described, she continued, a human who disobeyed orders, who carried Sithari children through fire while burning alive himself, who sealed doors behind him and never emerged when the extraction teams arrived. Jonas set the instrument down a little too hard. People exaggerate in stories. Not these, she said. These are royal archives. My people are tedious about accuracy. He laughed despite himself. That's one word for it. Silence returned, heavier this time. Outside the bay, the station's hull groaned softly as it adjusted orbit, a reminder that nothing here was stable, no matter how much metal surrounded them. You're very calm about this, Jonas said finally. Most people react more dramatically when they think they found a ghost. I didn't find a ghost, Illyra said. I found a man hiding under a very ordinary name. That hurt, he said. I chose this name carefully. It has a solid, forgettable ring. She studied him. Jonas? She repeated as if tasting it. Yes, very forgettable. That was the point, wasn't it? He met her gaze, humor flickering back like a shield. If I wanted to be remembered, I'd have joined a band. A band? Musicians, he explained. Loud, impractical, very memorable. Her lips curved. In Sithari culture, musicians are considered dangerous. Of course they are. She leaned back, crossing her arms. You disappeared after the Karen incident. Human records claim you died. Human records are very optimistic when it suits them. And yet, she said softly, here you are, treating soldiers from both sides, pretending neutrality is a personality trait. Jonas shrugged. It's a hobby. Illyra's expression shifted then, the humor fading but not vanishing entirely. Jonas, she said, and this time she used his name like a question, do you know what happens when truths like yours stay buried? He didn't answer right away. He watched a med drone drift past, watched a technician yawn in the corridor beyond, watched the station pretend it was just another night. Usually, he said, they come back louder. She nodded. And more expensive. He smiled thinly. You drive a hard bargain, just Illyra. She rose from the chair, steady as ever, and held out her hand. Jonas stared at it. Her fingers were long, elegant, utterly uncalloused by the kind of work that ruined joints and souls. I am Princess Illyra of the Sithari, she said quietly, and I did not come here by accident. Jonas looked at her hand, then at her face, then laughed. I knew it, he said. No one heals that fast without diplomatic immunity. She waited, patient. He didn't take her hand. Not yet. Jonas did not take her hand, which was unfortunate, because it meant he had to decide what to do with the silence instead. The silence, emboldened by his hesitation, expanded. It pressed itself into the corners of the medical bay, sat on equipment consoles, and generally behaved like it owned the place. I should report you, he said finally. Illyra did not lower her hand. To whom? He gestured vaguely. Someone with a uniform and a fondness for forms. Ah, she said, your people's most fearsome weapon. He exhaled through his nose. You can't just declare yourself a princess in the middle of a border station and expect everyone to nod politely. I wasn't expecting nodding, she said. I was expecting disbelief, possibly shouting. You're being very restrained. I'm tired, Jonas replied. And if you're actually Sithari royalty, then statistically my night is about to get worse. She withdrew her hand at last, folding it back against her side. You're not wrong. He moved past her, activating a privacy field with a flick of his wrist. The air shimmered faintly, sealing the bay from casual observation. Congratulations, he said. You've just earned the deluxe confidential treatment package. No extra charge. Mostly because billing royalty is a nightmare. She watched him with that same unsettling calm. You're afraid. Of you, he scoffed. I've been afraid of paperwork since I was 20. You're just additional complexity. Of the truth, she corrected. Jonas paused, then shrugged. That too. He leaned against a counter, arms crossed, scars on full display now that pretense had lost its appeal. The burns caught the light in strange ways, pale lines intersecting like a map no one had wanted to finish. He had spent years keeping them covered, not out of shame, but out of efficiency. Questions slowed things down. Illyra's gaze softened, just a fraction. In our archive, she said, You are referred to as the ash bearer. Jonas blinked. That's dramatic. My people value symbolism, she said. Also melodrama. It helps children remember. He snorted. Of course it does. Meanwhile, my people called me a liability. She tilted her head. You saved Sathari children. And disobeyed orders, Jonas replied. Human command doesn't like multitasking. He pushed off the counter and began pacing, the motion restless but familiar. You should know, he said, that if you're here to drag me into some grand moral reckoning, I am spectacularly underqualified. I fix broken bones and tell bad jokes. That's my range. You underestimate yourself, Alira said. Also, your jokes are inconsistent. That's generous. She moved closer, stopping just short of invading his carefully maintained personal space. I didn't come to force you, she said. I came to offer you something. He raised an eyebrow. Other than the worst surprise of my career? Sanctuary, she said. Truth, and an end to hiding. He laughed then, genuinely this time, though it carried a brittle edge. You say that like it's a gift basket. For you, she said quietly. It might be. Jonas stopped pacing. You realize what you're asking, he said. If I testify, if I confirm your archives, the treaty collapses. Humans deny the massacre. Sathari demand justice. Borders burn. People like me get to watch it happen from very safe distances while pretending it was inevitable. Illyra did not flinch. Peace built on lies is not peace. It is a pause. He studied her face, searching for fanaticism, for royal arrogance, for the cold certainty of someone who had never held a dying child. He found none of it. Instead, he saw exhaustion carefully arranged into composure. You were there, he said slowly. She nodded. I was young, too young to understand why humans were shouting while carrying us. I remember hands, smoke, heat, and a man who smelled like antiseptic and fear. Jonas swallowed. That narrows it down to most medics. You told us a joke, she said. Something about the universe charging extra for dramatic exits. He closed his eyes. For a moment, the station vanished, replaced by firelit corridors and crying children with long ears pressed flat against their heads. I said, he murmured, if anyone asks, we planned this. Elira smiled faintly. Yes. Silence returned, but this time it was quieter, less aggressive. Jonas rubbed a hand over his face. You really are a princess. Yes. And you really tracked me down because of my arms. And because of what they mean, she added. He sighed. This is going to ruin my schedule. She allowed herself a soft laugh. You don't strike me as someone who enjoys schedules. I enjoy pretending I have one. A warning chime echoed faintly through the bay, signaling incoming communications. Jonas glanced at the console. Great, he said. Command channel. That'll be someone asking why a Sathari casualty is using restricted bandwidth. Illyra straightened. Then it's time. For what? He asked. For you to decide whether you remain Jonas, she said, or become the ash bearer again. He looked at her. Really looked at the long ears that marked her as other, at the steadiness that had survived fire and politics and loss. He thought of the scars on his arms, of the years spent hiding in plain sight, of how tired he was of being forgettable. Jonas reached out and this time took her hand. Just so we're clear, he said, forcing a smile as the console began to beep insistently. If this starts a war, I'm blaming you. Illyra's grip was warm, reassuring. Fair, she said. If it helps, my people will write excellent songs about it. He groaned. Dangerous musicians. I knew it. The first thing Jonas did after taking Illyra's hand was regret the excellent timing of the universe. The console chimed again, louder this time, its display pulsing with the polite urgency of someone who absolutely intended to become impolite if ignored. Jonas released Illyra's hand and reached over, slapping the control panel with more force than necessary. A human command insignia bloomed into the air, followed by the sharp, compressed face of an officer who had never set foot on a border station and was very proud of that fact. Medical Outpost 7-4, the officer said. We're registering anomalous energy usage from your bay. Explain. Jonas smiled. He had perfected this smile over years. It was friendly, exhausted, and conveyed just enough incompetence to be believable. Yes, sir. Equipment malfunction. The stabilizer got excited. Excited, the officer repeated flatly. It's old, Jonas said. Like most of us. The officer's eyes flicked sideways, reading data. You're treating sci-fi casualties. Equal opportunity patching, Jonas said. Very progressive. Illyra stood just out of frame, arms folded, watching with open curiosity. Jonas resisted the urge to glance at her. He had a feeling that introducing a sci-fi princess into the conversation would escalate things in a way no amount of humor could diffuse. Be advised, the officer continued, that any sci-fi of strategic value are to be reported immediately. Jonas nodded. Of course. I always keep an eye out for glowing crowns and ceremonial banners. The channel cut without farewell. Jonas exhaled slowly and leaned back against the counter. Well, he said, that went poorly, but not catastrophically. A personal best. Illyra raised an eyebrow. You lie with impressive efficiency. Practice, he said. Lots of practice. They left the medical bay shortly after, moving through the station's quieter corridors. Jonas had insisted on relocating her to a private recovery room, officially to monitor her condition, unofficially to reduce the number of people who might notice that she was far too composed for a wounded soldier. The corridor lights dimmed as they passed, reacting to their biosignatures, and the station's low hum settled into a steady background presence. You navigate this place like it's an extension of your body, Illyra observed. Jonas shrugged. I know where it leaks. That's usually enough. The recovery room was small but clean, its walls lined with diagnostic panels and a narrow viewport looking out onto the star-flecked darkness beyond the hull. Illyra paused by the window, gazing out at the distant glow of the contested border. Jonas watched her reflection in the glass, the long curve of her ears silhouetted against the stars. You're thinking about consequences, he said. I always am, she replied. Royal upbringing. They teach us to anticipate disasters before breakfast. That explains the calm, he said. Humans usually need caffeine first. She turned to face him. Jonas, you're aware that if you leave with me, this station will not protect you. He laughed softly. This station barely protects itself. He moved to the room's small replicator and tapped in a request. The machine whirred, then produced 2 cups of something approximating tea. He handed one to her. It's supposed to be calming, he said, or toxic. The label is unclear. She accepted it, sniffed cautiously, then took a sip. It tastes like regret. High praise, Jonas said. They sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping dubious beverages and listening to the station's distant sounds. Jonas found himself unexpectedly comfortable, which made him deeply suspicious. You know, he said, when I ran, I told myself I was doing it to survive. Turns out I was just very committed to procrastination. Illyra smiled faintly. You delayed history. Unintentionally, he said. I've never been good at planning. She set her cup aside. If you come with me, you won't just be a witness. You'll be a symbol. Jonas groaned. I was hoping for retired medic with a garden. You may still have that, she said. Eventually. Eventually is doing a lot of work there. A soft vibration rippled through the floor as a ship docked. Jonas stiffened. That'll be the diplomatic envoy, he said. They're early, which is never a good sign. Illyra straightened. Then we should move. They made their way through maintenance corridors. Jonas leading with practiced ease, bypassing security nodes and sealed hatches with codes that were technically outdated but still worked because no one ever bothered to update them. As they walked, Jonas couldn't help commenting. For a civilization obsessed with control, we're remarkably lazy about maintenance. Illyra chuckled. Your empire relies on the assumption that no one will look too closely. Works until it doesn't, Jonas said. They emerged near a secondary hangar where a small, sleek sci-fi craft waited, its surface shimmering with adaptive camouflage. Illyra paused, looking back down the corridor toward the heart of the station. If you choose to stay, she said, I will understand. Jonas looked at the ship, at the unknown it represented, then back at the station that had hidden him for so long. He thought of the scars on his arms, of children with soot-streaked faces, of jokes told to keep fear at bay. He grinned. If I don't leave now, he said, I'll just find another excuse tomorrow. Illyra extended her hand again. This time Jonas took it without hesitation. As they stepped toward the ship, alarms began to sound behind them. Not the panicked wail of immediate danger, but the measured alert of systems realizing something important had gone missing. Jonas winced. "We're going to be very popular." "Yes," Illyra said. "On both sides." The ship's hatch sealed behind them, muting the alarms to a distant echo. As the engines powered up, Jonas strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat, glancing at the controls. "I should warn you," he said, "I'm terrible at flying." Illyra settled into the pilot's chair, fingers dancing over the interface with effortless precision. "Good," she said. "Then you won't be tempted to interfere." The ship slipped free of the station, stars stretching into lines as they jumped toward sci-fi space. Jonas let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Well," he said, forcing a smile as the border vanished behind them, "there goes my quiet life." Illyra's gaze remained fixed on the stars ahead. "It was never going to stay quiet," she said. And for the first time in years, Jonas believed her. The sci-fi ship did not fly so much as decide where it wished to be and persuade the universe to cooperate. Jonas watched the stars stretch and fold, the viewport briefly filling with layered geometries that made his eyes itch. He looked away, focusing instead on the reassuringly mundane hum of the restraint harness. "I'm adding that to my list," he said. "Things I will never complain about again. Number 3, turbulence." Illyra glanced at him from the pilot's seat, her hands moving in precise arcs across a translucent interface that responded more like a living thing than a machine. "You adapt quickly," she said. "I panic efficiently," Jonas replied. "It looks similar from the outside." The ship settled into normal space with a sensation like a held breath being released. Outside, sci-fi territory unfolded in soft gradients of light, luminous currents marking trade routes and defense grids that curved like constellations drawn by someone with a fondness for symmetry. Jonas leaned forward despite himself. "Your people decorate their borders," he said. "We usually just put mines there and call it a day." "We find mines unimaginative," Illyra said. "Also messy." The ship's internal lights brightened subtly as they crossed an invisible threshold. A calm voice resonated through the cabin, speaking in sci-fi tones that Jonas's translator struggled with for a moment before settling into something approximating meaning. "Welcome home, princess." Jonas winced. "That's going to take some getting used to." Illyra's expression softened. "You don't have to call me that." "Good," he said. "I was running out of respectful synonyms." The journey took longer than Jonas expected, not in distance, but in sensation. Sci-fi space was threaded with currents of exotic particles that the ship harvested casually, converting them into propulsion and shielding in ways that made human engineering look like enthusiastic guesswork. Jonas spent most of the time resisting the urge to ask questions that would make him sound like a tourist. When the ship finally docked, it was with a structure that did not resemble a station so much as a city grown around a star. Platforms spiraled outward, connected by bridges of light and matter, while smaller vessels moved along prescribed paths with choreographed precision. Jonas stared. "I'm guessing this isn't a hidden outpost," he said. Illyra stood, smoothing her travel-worn attire, which now seemed deliberately plain in contrast to the elegance around them. "This is one of our quieter ports." Jonas laughed. "Of course it is." They were met by a small delegation almost immediately. Sci-fi officials moved with a grace that suggested confidence rather than urgency, their long ears adorned with subtle markings denoting rank and lineage. Jonas felt suddenly underdressed in his medic's jacket, which still bore a faint stain he had failed to remove weeks earlier. Illyra spoke with them in her own language, the sounds flowing like music punctuated by sharp consonants. Jonas caught fragments through the translator. Status reports, security updates, mentions of diplomatic ripples spreading outward like shockwaves. When she finished, the officials bowed slightly and withdrew, leaving them alone in a private corridor that overlooked the port. "You didn't tell them everything," Jonas said. "No," Illyra agreed. "I prefer to introduce disasters gradually." He smiled. "A woman after my own heart." They walked in silence for a time, the floor responding to their steps with faint illumination. Jonas became acutely aware of how exposed he felt, how every open space seemed to invite scrutiny. He had spent years blending into the background. Here, there was no background to blend into. "You're thinking about escape routes," Elira observed. "Habit," he said. "I like to know where the walls are." She stopped near a broad window that revealed the inner layers of the city, where Sathari moved among living structures that pulsed gently with bioluminescence. "You're safe here," she said. "For now." "That for now is doing a lot of work," Jonas replied. Elira turned to face him. "Jonas, the council will want to see you." He sighed. "I was afraid you'd say that. Councils make me itchy." "They will want to hear your account," she continued, "in full." He leaned against the railing, staring down at the city. "And then they'll decide what to do with me." "They will decide what to do with the truth," she corrected, "which usually involves someone getting very angry." She smiled faintly. "Often." They were given quarters overlooking a quieter section of the city, where light flowed like water along the walls. Jonas explored the room cautiously, poking at interfaces that responded to his touch with polite curiosity. He eventually collapsed onto a seating structure that reshaped itself to accommodate his weight. "I think it's judging me," he said. "It's adjusting," Elira replied. "It finds humans asymmetrical." "Rude." Later, as the artificial cycle dimmed the lights to simulate evening, Jonas found himself unable to sleep. The room was too quiet, too perfect. He stood by the window, arms folded, scars catching the ambient glow. "You regret coming," Elira said from behind him. He considered the question. "I regret not bringing cleaner socks," he said. Then more seriously, "No, I regret that it took this long." She joined him at the window. "When you testify," she said, "your government will deny you. They may accuse you again." "Again," he echoed softly. "You may lose whatever protection remains," she continued. "You may become inconvenient." Jonas snorted. "I've been inconvenient my entire adult life." She looked at him then, really looked, her gaze tracing the lines of exhaustion etched into his face. "You saved my people," she said. "Whether they acknowledge it publicly or not, they will not forget." He smiled sadly. "Your archives are very thorough." "Yes," she said, "and very stubborn." A chime sounded gently, signaling an incoming message. Elira glanced at the display, her expression tightening just a fraction. "The council wishes to meet tomorrow." Jonas groaned. "I should practice my dramatic pauses." "You should rest," she said. He turned to her, the city's glow framing her long ears and steady eyes. "Elira," he said, "if this goes badly—" She interrupted him, placing a hand lightly over his scarred forearm. "Then it will go badly with honesty," she said. "That matters." He closed his eyes briefly, grounding himself in the warmth of her touch. "You know," he said, opening them again, "for a princess, you're remarkably bad at reassuring people." She smiled just a little. "For a medic, you're remarkably good at surviving." They stood there together, watching Sathari's space drift and glow beyond the glass, both of them acutely aware that tomorrow would change more than either of them could predict. Jonas decided that if he was going to face a Sathari council, he would at least do it properly caffeinated. Unfortunately, Sathari stimulants were engineered for neural architectures that included sensory nodes humans did not possess, and the beverage Elira offered him glowed faintly and hummed when poured. "What does it do?" Jonas asked, eyeing the cup. "It sharpens focus," Elira said. "Enhances clarity. Mildly elevates heart rate." "Mildly," he repeated. "Define mildly." She considered. "You may feel as though your thoughts are slightly ahead of time." Jonas took a cautious sip. The liquid tasted like cold metal and citrus regret. His eyes widened. "I hate that this works." "Drink slowly," she said. "Too late." By the time they reached the council chamber, Jonas felt alert in a way that was both impressive and deeply unsettling. His thoughts lined up neatly, one after the other, like they had finally agreed on an agenda. He suspected this was how people with ambition felt all the time and made a mental note never to trust them. The chamber itself was vast, circular, and layered vertically, with platforms arranged in a slow spiral around a central space. Counselors occupied these platforms, their forms partially obscured by light fields that displayed shifting symbols: history, lineage, jurisdiction. Jonas counted at least 12 and stopped when the number began to feel symbolic. "This is excessive," he muttered. "It's meant to be," Alira replied quietly. "Intimidation encourages honesty." "Then I'm doomed," he said. "I lie when nervous." She shot him a look. "Try not to." They stepped into the central space. The light adjusted immediately, scanning Jonas with a thoroughness that felt uncomfortably personal. A sci-fi voice resonated through the chamber, layered and calm. "Princess Alira, you return with a human." "Yes," Alira said, "and with truth." A ripple of motion passed through the council. Jonas cleared his throat. "Hello," he said. "I would like to begin by stating that I did not plan to be here." Several councilors tilted their heads in unison. Jonas took this as a bad sign. Alira spoke then, her voice steady as she recounted the events of the border station, her discovery of Jonas's scars, and the connection to the Karen incident. As she spoke, holographic projections bloomed in the air. Archival footage, fragmented and raw. Jonas saw himself younger, thinner, running through smoke with a child clutched to his chest. He looked away. "Is this accurate?" the voice asked. Jonas sighed. "Mostly. I don't remember being that dramatic." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Alira glanced at him sharply. "Sorry," he whispered. "Coping mechanism." He straightened, forcing himself to meet the council's collective gaze. "I was a field medic," he said. "I followed orders until the orders stopped making sense. After that, I followed people who needed help." The projections shifted, showing the weapon discharge, the cleansing sweep, the sealed exits. Jonas felt the familiar tightening in his chest but pushed through it. "I saved who I could," he continued, "and then I ran, not because I regretted it, but because my command decided compassion was treason." Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Jonas waited for condemnation, for demands, for something to break the stillness. Instead, a counselor spoke. "Why return now?" Jonas laughed softly. "I didn't. Your princess kidnapped me." Alira did not look amused. "I'm joking," he added quickly. "Mostly, I came because hiding doesn't make the past smaller. It just gives it more room to grow." The council conferred briefly, light fields flickering as data was exchanged at speeds Jonas's enhanced focus barely kept up with. Finally, the voice returned. "Your testimony confirms our records," it said. "It also threatens the treaty." "Yes," Jonas agreed. "That's the problem with the truth. Very inconsiderate." Alira stepped forward. "Peace maintained by denial will fail," she said. "We have delayed this reckoning too long." Jonas glanced at her. "You realize this could get very loud." "Yes," she said, "but silence has already cost enough." The council dismissed them with formal gestures, instructing them to wait while deliberations continued. Outside the chamber, Jonas leaned heavily against the wall. "Well," he said, "that went better than expected. No one shouted. No one arrested me." Alira exhaled slowly. "They are divided." "Of course they are," Jonas said. "Unity would be suspicious." They walked back through the city, tension hanging between them like static. Jonas tried to lighten it. "So," he said, "what happens if they decide I'm more trouble than I'm worth?" Alira did not answer immediately. "Then I will argue," she said, loudly. He smiled. "I'd pay to see that." "You may," she said dryly, "in consequences." Later, alone in the quiet of their quarters, Jonas found his hands shaking slightly now that the stimulant was wearing off. He sat, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. "I'm not afraid of being punished," he said suddenly. "I'm afraid they'll decide it's easier not to know." Alira sat beside him. "They already know," she said, "because you spoke." He nodded, swallowing. "I never wanted to be important." She placed her hand over his. "You wanted to be useful." He laughed weakly. "That's worse." A soft chime echoed through the room, signaling an incoming transmission. Alira looked at it, her expression unreadable. "The council has reached a preliminary decision," she said. Jonas stood, squaring his shoulders. "All right," he said. "Let's hear how history plans to inconvenience us." They faced the light together, whatever it was about to say. The light resolved slowly, as if the council had decided that rushing bad news was impolite. Jonas stood with his hands loosely clasped in front of him, shoulders squared in a posture he had not used since he still believed standing straight could make authority hesitate. Alira stood beside him, calm as ever, though Jonas had learned by now that her calm was an active process, not an absence of feeling. "The council has reached its decision," the layered voice said. "There will be no immediate public tribunal." Jonas blinked. "That sounds like the beginning of a sentence designed to hurt me later." Alira did not interrupt. "The treaty will stand," the voice continued. "For now, it will be amended. A joint historical commission will be formed. Your testimony will be sealed temporarily, protected under sci-fi sovereign archive law." Jonas exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and disbelief. "So, no war today?" "Not today," the voice agreed. Alira inclined her head. "And Jonas?" "He will be granted sanctuary," the council said. "Not as a symbol, but as a witness. He will advise the commission. He will speak when asked. He will not be surrendered to human command." Jonas laughed before he could stop himself. It burst out of him, sharp and surprised. "I can't believe that worked." A pause. "Your reaction is noted." The light faded. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jonas slumped back against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, like a man whose legs had just remembered gravity existed. "Well," he said, staring at the ceiling, "that's going to complicate my retirement plans." Alira sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You wanted a garden," she said. "I wanted anonymity," he corrected. "The garden was a compromise." She smiled. "You can still have both. Just not immediately." He turned his head to look at her. "You did this." "We did this," she corrected gently. They stayed there until the city lights shifted, the sci-fi equivalent of evening settling in waves of softened illumination. Jonas felt something unfamiliar settling in his chest. Not fear, not vigilance, but a cautious quiet. The commission began weeks later. Jonas spoke into rooms full of projections, into recorders that translated emotion as well as language, into silence that listened instead of waiting for him to finish so it could argue back. He told the story from beginning to end, without jokes at first, then with them, because some truths were unbearable without a little humor to wedge them open. He spoke of smoke and screaming corridors, of children who refused to let go of his coat, of orders that made no sense unless you removed the word people from the equation. No one interrupted. That alone felt revolutionary. Human command denied everything, of course. They always did. But denial sounded smaller now, echoing against records that refused to disappear and witnesses who no longer felt alone. Alira attended every session she could. Sometimes she asked questions. Sometimes she simply sat where Jonas could see her, long ears angled forward in quiet attention. When the weight of memory pressed too hard, she would meet his eyes and nod, as if reminding him that the fire was no longer around them. Between sessions, life continued in strange, gentle ways. Jonas learned how to navigate sci-fi cities without staring like a tourist. He learned that their musicians were indeed dangerous, particularly the ones who believed dissonance was a moral argument. He learned that their food was excellent if you accepted that texture was optional. He also learned how to sleep without one ear tuned for alarms. One evening, as they walked along a balcony overlooking a living structure that pulsed softly with bioluminescence, Jonas stopped. "You know," he said, "for the first time in years, no one is looking for me." Alira considered this. "How does that feel?" He smiled slowly. "Uncomfortable. I keep expecting to need a fake name." "You may keep one, wait," she said, "if you like." He thought about it. "No, I think I'll keep the real one. It's grown on me." She nodded, approving. The treaty did not shatter. It cracked, bent, reshaped itself around truths it had tried very hard not to know. There were protests, diplomatic standoffs, carefully worded statements full of phrases like ongoing review and regrettable outcomes. But there was no war, not yet, and not this time. Months later, Jonas stood in a small, sunlit space at the edge of a sci-fi habitat dome, dirt under his fingernails and a stubborn plant refusing to cooperate. "It's not supposed to wilt," he muttered. Alira crouched beside him. "You're overwatering." I'm compensating emotionally. She laughed, the sound light and unguarded. You're allowed to let things live without saving them. He looked at the plant, then at his scarred arms. Slowly he eased his grip. The plant remained unimpressed but alive. Jonas leaned back, squinting up at the artificial sky. You know, he said, I spent years thinking survival meant disappearing. And now? Elira asked. And now, he said, it feels like staying. She reached for his hand, fingers warm and steady. He did not flinch this time. He did not pull away. In the distance,